Their official duties are to propose legislation and amendments, to serve on several committees of the State House where they will review legislation and decide which legislation goes to the full House for consideration, to vote on legislation and any amendments, and to serve their constituents by helping solve problems that constituents are having with any state agencies. I will mention at this time that the incumbent, Acevedo, declined to participate. Having said that, I will now introduce the candidates.
Thanks to the V.F.W. for having this forum, and I'm very glad to be here tonight to expose and to answer any questions and concerns you might have for us candidates. My name is Morfin, and I live I'm a Chicago long life resident. Grew up part of a community that the Pilsen community, and I just want to mention the fact that being the fact that the incumbent is not here is a disrespect to every single one of us, being that the harsh economic times that we find ourselves in, people losing their homes to foreclosure, people losing their jobs, schools, Chicago public schools being closed, and the incumbent is not here to address the issues. I am here to expose and to listen to your concerns. I'm very honored to be here at the Post, and I appreciate you coming here tonight. Thank you very much.
And now onto the questions. Under the heading of Elections and Ethics, do you support any changes to Illinois' election process or laws? If so, please explain.
You want to go first? Yes, I do. First and foremost, I believe that elections should take place in better weather, like summertime or springtime. A lot of the voter turnout, most of the voter turnout is always low because the weather, it's always, elections are taking place in February or March. It's still cold, it's snowing, it's slippery outside. We have a lot of elderly people and people with disabilities that can't get to the polling places. So I would say change the dates of voting and make it in the summertime or springtime. Also, I believe that it's really unfair to have aldermen and committeemen to elect election judges, because then it's not as transparent and it's not as fair for the challenging candidates that are running against incumbents.
How would you make sure that our district gets a piece of the job pie once the government funds for highly anticipated public work projects such as fixing bridges and roads?
Well, when a public project is being developed in our communities, actually there's already established ordinance law here in the city of Chicago and in the state of Illinois that companies, employers are supposed to hire, or general contractors are supposed to hire a certain percentage of minority business enterprise, women business enterprise, DBEs, and the whole works. So including residents from the area. Do employers and general contractors actually follow that law? Do they implement those percentages the higher employees are supposed to have in the projects? No, because there's no accountability. We have elected officials that unfortunately it falls through the cracks, or they turn the other way, and you find that the majority of the people that are working in the project are from suburbs and not from the community. I would make sure that if it's a state job, that will be implemented 100%.
Would you support or oppose the banning of payday loans or any other predatory lending institutions?
Well, I can tell you that predatory lending institutions have really made a big profit in our communities throughout the nation, not just here in District 2. As you can see, the foreclosure rate is up the roof, and there's really no regulation on these lending institutions, and that's why we find ourselves in this situation. As far as banning the payday loan places, I think that those places are necessary. I mean, people utilize those places, and but they need to be regulated. The interest rates that they charge are just absurd. They have to be regulated just like gambling. I feel that, Joe says that he's against gambling. Gambling is going to happen. We can't turn the other way. It's happening. It's all over. It's all around us. It's in Chicago, in Indiana. We need jobs. We need to develop jobs. We need to, any way possible. People are going to gamble. People are going to smoke. People are going to do what they're going to do. And so we need to be cognizant of that. We need to have payday. If we need to have payday loan places, then we need to have them. But we need to regulate everything that happens in the city and the state of Illinois. It's absurd. Some of these ATM machines are charging you $4.50 to get your own money. So those rates need to be regulated, and they need to be regulated right away, because we're just throwing money away. If you're not taking money from your own bank at your own branch or your own bank, you're paying $4.50, $3.50, $2.50. So there's no control, there's no regulation in ATM fees, and they need to be regulated.
Would you cap interest rates on credit cards and other consumer loans? If not, why not?
I would also be for regulating interest rates on credit cards, because some of these credit cards, I mean, come on, it's 29% interest rate, so they need to be regulated. I mean, come on, let's be real here. I myself, I think all of us at one point own a credit card, and sometimes you have to go that way. But it's like you owe $1,000. It's like you take 2-3 years to pay $1,000 because of the interest rate if you don't pay it in one lump sum. So yes, they need to be regulated.
Awarded in civil judgments as a result of medical malpractice or personal injury.
I am for putting a cap, depending on the injury, of course. If you're at the workforce and it's unfortunate that you get hurt on the job, depending on the injury, because if it's an injury that's going to cause you to be disabled for the rest of your life, then there shouldn't be a limit, because what are you going to depend on? But if it's an injury, there's abuse, and I've seen it in the court system that there's abuse. People suing the employer for minor injuries for thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So there should be a cap depending on the injury that happened on the job.
State funding to at least 50% of public education costs. If so, how would you use the additional funds?
I am absolutely for increasing the funding for education up to 50% and even more, because we all know what's going on with our public education system and education overall in the state of Illinois. And it's unfortunate that a lot of schools, just yesterday, the education board announced they're closing 17 schools in the city of Chicago, or turnaround schools, that's what they're calling it, because of, they say it's poor performance, but it's lack of resources, it's lack of funding, because the funding is going into a private system. And so, what is wrong with our public education? Yes, it needs improvement. I'm a product of a public education. I was able to make it through. There's a lot of students, thousands of students out there that are attending public schools, and they turn out to be productive citizens in society. Lawyers, architects, politicians, presidents. And so, yes, our system needs to be revamped. Yes, our system needs improvement. But if you take away the resources, how are we going to do that? How are we going to help these schools? If you're channeling the resources and the funding to a private system that cannot guarantee good quality education, a private system that takes away the voice of the community. So that's what I feel about funding, and it's just unacceptable what's going on here in our education in Chicago and the state of Illinois.
Thank you. Do you support vouchers or other means of public funding for private schools?
I do support vouchers and funding for private schools, with the condition that these resources and the funding go to students with special needs, students that with disabilities. And also, by me supporting these vouchers for private education system, they would have to meet the standards of the state of Illinois, education state of Illinois. So nothing wrong with supporting the funding for private schools with the condition that they meet the standards of the education of Illinois and that students with disabilities and special needs are catered to. I think that we have to first address the needs of the public school system before we continue to channel funding for a private system. A private system that, yes, guarantees, if you want to say a better curriculum, yes, guarantees state-of-the-art buildings, but we need to prioritize on what we have. We need to invest in our neighborhood schools. We need to revamp our curriculum. We need to fix and expand our schools that are overcrowded so that our students can stay in their communities. Because, see, right now what's happening is with the 17 schools that they're closing or turnaround schools, they don't realize that kids are going to have to go to different schools and cross. Let's talk reality here. There's a lot of gang affiliation, and there's a lot of borders that kids need to cross going to a different school, being that these schools are going to be closed. We need to prioritize on that. We need to work on anti-violence. And how are we going to prevent this? We're going to make things worse by closing these schools and having these kids go out of their boundaries to a different school. So that's the way I feel about that.
Do you support the termination or modification of the General Assembly Scholarship Fund? Please explain your position.
I do support the scholarship fund of the General Assembly, but I also feel that there needs to be modification there. There's been cases in the past where recipients, students getting these scholarships are politically connected to a state representative, to an alderman, to an elected official, and that needs to be transparent. That needs to be modified so that all students and all recipients applying for those scholarships all get a fair share, or get a fair opportunity to get those scholarships.
Under the heading of civil rights and civil liberties, do you support affirmative action?
I believe affirmative action, yes, that should be supported, but we have to be very careful as to not make sure that we don't cause reverse discrimination. So the way affirmative action is to guarantee equality in the workforce for men, women, and minorities, or anybody in the workforce. And my point is that if an employer is to meet a quota, a percentage of minority employees in a project, in a public project, and there's 2 applicants to the job, whether it's any kind of trade, whether it's carpenter, electrician, and there's 2 applicants for the same job, just because they need to meet a quota doesn't mean that that's the qualified individual for the job. We need to be very careful with that. I am for affirmative action, but we need to also be careful not to reverse discrimination.
Legalizing civil marriages in the state.
I support legalizing civil marriages in the state. I mean, I don't know how much further I can say about that, but I support it.
Thank you. Do you support mandatory drug testing for county and state employees?
I do believe that we should have testing for county and state employees, and basically any employee that is dealing with the public safety, that is dealing with food and anything that has to do with public service. Further, I would definitely and energetically support the testing of drugs of elected officials, because that does not happen. And let me tell you, we need to do that. We need to test these elected officials because some of them look very, very suspicious. So I am for it.
Next question. Should state police be allowed to stop drivers to test for DUI on grounds other than probable cause?
Again, seeing cases come into court with making arrests, whether it's state police, city police, or any authority, I believe there needs to be probable cause, because again, it costs taxpayers money, because again, we hold the system, and we have many other important cases that need to be heard in court, and so there's always needs to be probable cause when bringing cases into court.
Current legislation that permits employers to eavesdrop on the telephone conversation of their employees.
Again, we go back to probable cause. I believe if an employer has any type of suspicion that an employee is violating the rules and laws of his or her job, then it should be allowable.
Question. Do you support or oppose privatization of state services? If so, which services?
I tell you, I'm against the privatization of education. I'm against the privatization of basically everything and anything that has to be with serving the public. Why? Because when you privatize a service, when you privatize something, you're not guaranteed quality service. Not only that, but also when a private entity takes over a city service, a state service, they don't really have to buy or hire the people within the area. We don't want privatization of our services. We don't want privatization of our schools, education. We need to stay public, because that's where our money comes. Our tax money goes so that services are rendered to us, the constituents. So I'm against privatization of any service.
Of Health and Human Services. Do you support the President's Affordable Care Act? If so, how would you implement it in Illinois? If not, what is your plan for providing health care to Illinois residents without insurance?
I support the President's health care plan, but additionally, I would, as I stated previously, I would propose some kind of a progressive tax to make health insurance affordable for all families. But how do we make it affordable? We need to make it affordable based on their income. Families cannot pay for a private health care plan based on the rates that are currently available. We need to make legislation so that families are getting health care that they need for their children, for their elderly, and for the whole family based on their income in the family. Germany has an example of a perfect plan of health care where families get their health care plan based on their income, and that's what we need to have here in the state of Illinois.
Legislation to authorize age-appropriate sex education in public schools.
I do. I support that, because I believe that we need to be teaching our children in the education system about sex education. Let's talk reality once again. We have teenage girls pregnant during grammar school and high school. We have sexually transmitted diseases all over the place. We need to teach our children. We need to teach our students about sex education. We can't hide that. Children and young people are going to go out there and they're going to do what they're going to do. So we need to educate them at home, and we need to educate them in school about sex education.
Housing. Would you support legislation requiring mortgage holders to honor the terms of existing residential leases in effect when the property is foreclosed upon? If yes, what additional steps would you take to protect existing tenants from becoming homeless?
Yes, that's a problem that we're seeing throughout our communities in the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois and throughout the nation. We're seeing boarded up homes. We're seeing 2-3 boarded up homes per block. And what is just recently, 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to ask one of our senators, Richard Durbin, about what is Congress doing about the foreclosure and the housing crisis. And he didn't have an answer for me. He did not have an answer for me. He said, I wish I had an answer for you, but I don't. And yet, these banks and lending institutions are being bailed out. Who's going to bail us out? about the families and the people that are losing their homes. Not only is it bad for the families that are losing their homes, but also these boarded up homes attract criminal activity. And so I'm definitely for honor the terms of existing residential leasing. Not only that, but also extend the program from 3 months to 6 months so that families are able to save their homes.
Energy and environment. Going green is the most cost-efficient and environmental friendly way to go. How would you improve the recycling opportunities in our district?
Well, I'm a big recycling individual. I believe that at this point, the city of Chicago, the entire city of Chicago, should have a recycling blue card implemented throughout the whole city. I have a little map here, and I don't know if you can see it, but the shaded areas of the Chicago area, that's where the blue card recycling program is implemented in the city of Chicago. Do we have one here or here in district number 2? No, we don't. And again, it comes about to accountability to our elected officials, and the aldermen are mainly responsible to implement the recycling program. I totally support a recycling program, and I would work very energetically to make sure that we have a recycling program in district number 2. I set the example, and what I've done in the past years is that in the summertime I give service learning hours to students that are willing to come out as a group with their parents, to come out and clean the streets, to come up and pick up debris that's on our sidewalks, on our streets, in exchange for service learning hours. And the kids are learning. They're learning the importance of recycling, keeping our communities clean, and saving the environment. So absolutely, we need to implement the recycling program right away.
Like cameras around schools.
I don't know about you guys, but I'm not a very big fan of red light cameras and traffic red light cameras, that is. That ticket you $100, and if you don't pay it in a month, it'll double up. I believe that if they're going to implement these red light cameras at the traffic stops, they need to have a second counter. So at least you know that the light is shortly turning yellow and then red. Because it has caused a lot of accidents. You don't know when it's slippery outside, when it's snowing, you don't know whether to stop, go, or what. And I've seen accidents where people just ram into people's cars in the back. And so, as far as implementing the red cameras, the cameras at the schools, I am for that. We need to have security system throughout our schools so that there's no vandalism, so that there's no gang affiliation or recruitment, there's no drug transactions. We need to have cameras. I am absolutely for cameras throughout and around our schools in our communities, but not the red light cameras that ticket you. I'm not a big fan of that.
Under the heading of criminal justice, do you support or oppose state legislation that bans the manufacture, sale, and possession of assault weapons?
I support legislation that bans manufacturing of assault weapons. We don't need weapons in our streets. We have enough violence in our streets. We have unjust killings of young people and innocent people losing their lives in the streets through gangs or just violence in general. We're working hard to take guns off our streets. We don't need to support manufacturing of more guns, especially high-impact weapons on the streets. Why does somebody have to have a shotgun or an AK-47 or an M16 on the street? I totally oppose and I am in favor of legislation to ban these manufacturing of these weapons.
Oppose state legislation permitting the carrying of concealed weapons.
I totally oppose it. Again, it goes back to getting the guns off the streets and reducing fatalities and crime and murders on the streets. As a juvenile probation officer, I had the unfortunate experience to lose 2 of my clients, and we're talking about a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old being shot in the head, and me having to see this in a cold murder like that. I am totally for taking the guns off the streets and not having people walk around with guns, concealed weapons, and committing cold murders like that. I am totally against that.
Do you support or oppose criminal prosecution of juveniles as adults?
I would say that it depends on the seriousness of the crime. If a juvenile, again, as a juvenile probation officer, I've had offenders, young offenders, who committed a murder. And if a young offender commits a murder, takes someone's life, then that individual, that young person should be tried as an adult. But I also believe in rehab, and I believe in counseling, and I believe in trying to integrate this young individual back into society. We can't lock them up forever and throw away the key. Because young people, when you're growing up, you're bound to be recruited, you're bound to be, if you don't have, what I found as a probation officer, if you don't have the attention, what's going on in our society is that when you don't have the attention at home from your parents and that quality time from your parents, you're bound to be recruited by a gang. You're bound to be integrated into drugs, and you're bound to go in the wrong direction. And so I believe in counseling, and I believe in rehabbing, and I believe in giving individuals, whether it's a young person or an adult, an opportunity to integrate them back into society.
I believe in the most.
Do you support alternative sentencing such as work release and or home monitoring opposed to jail?
I do, especially for young offenders. Again, I mentioned previously that our jails are jam-packed for minor and petty offenses. We need to bring people and try to integrate people back into society. People make mistakes, and sometimes there are mistakes that are against the law, but they're petty offenses, and the jails are packed. And so we need to leave the jails, alleviate the jails, and leave the jails for the serious offenses, and put people on home monitoring, and put people on house arrest, especially young offenders, so that they can go to counseling and get the help that they need.
Apps or Operation Ceasefire work as a way to combat street violence? If not, what are your ideas to solve the growing problem of youth violence?
I'm a true believer of ceasefire. Ceasefire and Moms Against Violence and Moms Against Crime and every another organization out there that's against violence. And I truly believe that these organizations are not being funded enough to combat the crime out there and to alleviate the crime out in our communities. We need to channel the right resources and the funding necessary to ceasefire has lost a lot of funding, and therefore we lost a lot of the individuals that are truly committed, neighborhood watch, mothers, fathers, even young people out there trying to fight crime. Without any resources, we can't do it. So I am totally in favor of channeling resources and giving them the proper funding that they need to fight crime.
Congressional Super Committee has thrown in the towel and admitted they cannot reach a bipartisan agreement to cut a minimum of $1.2 trillion from the federal budget over the next 10 years. Under the law passed last summer, mandatory cuts will now take place across all federal departments and agencies beginning in January 2013. Congress has proposed a plan for scapegoating veterans in what they're calling the 10 for 10, which means cutting 10 benefits to pay for 10 years of war. Congress, as well as thousands of registered lobbyists, will now be working hard to protect their special interests and programs. How aggressive would you be in protecting veterans' health care programs and benefits to see that our military men and women are given what they deserve and are able to keep what they have?
I can tell you that I would be extremely aggressive to make sure that no veteran services or resources are cut. I mean, it's very simple here. We talk about men and women who have served our country, who have risked their lives for our freedom. and you're gonna cut their services and you're gonna cut their resources. You know, it just bothers me that when politicians just so easily just vote on cutting services for veterans, elderly, healthcare, education, why can't they look at other means and other areas to cut? As your state legislator, I would energetically oppose any cuts to veteran services or resources. I can tell you that. I hope you guys are still awake. Well, first, I want to say that how would I do any different? I can tell you this right now. The first thing that I would do is go out to the polls and elect a new state representative, because it is a disrespect and a slap in the face for the incumbent not to be here when he was notified via email, fax, phone, and he declined to participate. Whether it's 5 of us or 500 of us constituents, he owes it to the voters to be here. So March 20th, you have 2 candidates here to make a choice. I just find it unacceptable that he's not here. But that goes to show what kind of elected official we have, what kind of state representative we have. I have a lot of experience, as I stated. I'm a product of these communities. I'm a Chicago lifelong resident. I'm a product of a public school. I have a lot of experience. I've been Spanish interpreter for the courts. I know how the court system is and where its faults are. I know where it needs to be improved in our justice system. I've been a juvenile probation officer, and that system needs to be improved as well. I've been local school council member of a school that together as a community, we were able to accomplish a $36 million expansion through the TIFs, tax increment financing. And I've founded an organization called Community in Action with the main goal to get young people involved and get them to do something productive in their life. And I've seen it all. I've been on both sides of the coin. And I can offer you new ideas, new vision, and I can offer you as your state legislator to be out here, not only around election time, but all the time, where you can actually see me, where we can interact and talk about the issues. They're in Springfield, I know, 6 months out of the year, but what happens the rest of the time? I'm someone that you will be seeing every day. You'll hear reports from me. I'll have meetings so that you know what's going on in our district and address the issues of our communities. That's what we need of our elected officials, and that's what I have to offer to you. We need to stop catering to these individuals who do not have a lack of respect for us, and we need to start electing individuals in our communities that are not politicians, but community residents that actually care about the issues in our communities. Thank you very much.